The past year was quite an interesting one for World of Warcraft, and it all started with the launch of Dragonflight, which was hyped up to be the expansion that will save retail, and it continued with the unexpected rise in popularity of Classic. It seemed like people abandoned retail for Classic at some point, but was it because one version of the game is better than the other? Let's find out. As a disclaimer, this won't be one of those videos in which I bash retail and praise Classic, or the other way around. I will try to be as objective as possible, even if I'm a Classic enjoyer, and really appreciate the old school leveling experience, dungeon design, and world PvP. I did, however, try retail whenever new expansion dropped and had fun trying new content, but it didn't manage to capture my interest for long periods of time like Classic has. Now let's start with the beginning. When Dragonflight was announced, it came like a glimmer of hope after Shadowlands managed to disappoint a lot of people. What probably amplified the feeling of disappointment was the fact that the initial premise of Shadowlands was good. It was a really good concept, but god, the execution was awful. And it all happened when we came out of BFA, which wasn't a masterpiece either, because someone decided that it's a good idea to turn the game into an RNG grindfest in order to increase player retention. It kind of worked the other way around. Blizzard kinda screwed up in the worst possible moment with Shadowlands, because a lot of people lost the last grain of trust they had in them and quit the game.
Look, it's down there at the fucking bottom. There's still this big of a fucking difference. Oh, it's so easy, so look at this. Maybe that's a problem with the game.
What probably saved the numbers at that point was the fact that it all happened during the pandemic and people were stuck indoors. Dragonflight brought up a lot of promising features while also removing some of the hated ones, and it all sounded pretty good. Let's start with my initial retail experience, as I think that it's pretty relevant because I encountered some of the issues that people have voiced over and over again. When Dragonflight launched, I was coming back from a long break. Like the last time I played retail was in BFA, and I totally skipped Shadowlands. It wasn't really intentional, I just had a lot of stuff going on in my life at that point and had no time to play. Learning about all the new features that will come into Dragonflight got me genuinely excited. I remember clearly that I liked the fact that we are going back to a more versatile style of talents, and it reminded me of Wrath. I was also impressed by the new profession system and some promises that PvP will get some improvements. Yeah, I know, the game is not that relevant in terms of PvP, but that's what I did the most back in the day, and when I play with my friends, that's how we have the most fun. I did try some of the dungeons and raids, but didn't get into a guild to do any progression, as I'm not that good with people and I really can reserve some of the evenings to get yelled at by some sweaty raid leader that takes this game way too serious. But the thing that really got me excited was the announcement of the solo shuffle. I was finally able to just log into the game and queue up for some rated arena even if my friends were not online, and without the need to spam looking for group and prove my worth with some achievement. I wanted to start a new character since I was coming back from a long break and wanted to try out the whole experience. I already made up my mind and rolled a shaman. The primary reason for this choice was the fact that my first ever character was a Tauren shaman. I wanted to get back to the origins, since the new expansion seemed to bring back some of the concepts that were present back in the day. With that in mind, I leveled up my character in the pre-patch, and the leveling experience was boring and it still felt like a chore, mainly spamming dungeons when the time walking event was up. The first red flag that I ignored was the fact that solo queue was taking like a lot of time to start. If you don't know, during the Dragonflight pre-patch you could queue up for skirmish solo shuffle. I did a couple of matches and it seemed pretty fun. I was enjoying it, but the queue time was quite long. I was like, alright, not so many people are playing right now since everyone is waiting for the launch. Not an issue. When the launch finally came, I was hyped, booked some annual leave from work just to no-life my way through the launch, reconnected with some old friends that played back in the day, and everything seemed really promising. The launch came and the Discord server was full. Everyone was trying to hit 70 so we can finally start playing the game. The campaign was a bit too long for my taste and I lost interest after the first two zones. Not an issue here, as I know that it's not for everyone. The solo shuffle turned out to be worse after launch. I was spending about an hour waiting for the queue to pop as a DPS. I was mining while doing all the waiting and managed to buy like 5 WoW tokens and ended up using them to play classic hardcore. Another issue that I noticed was the toxicity and elitism that I encountered throughout the game. Like we were queuing up for normal dungeons and people were expecting us to know the most efficient clear paths and to top up the DPS meters. This was a recurring theme even when I leveled my character to 60 during the pre-patch. Like, I met a lot of players that prefer to straight up leave and take the deserter debuff just because some guy didn't know the dungeon. This seemed to be more prevalent with tanks for some reason. Healers were a bit more chill. I was literally sick of the drama and of the attempts to vote out certain players of the group. In most cases, it was very clear that the clueless ones were new players, probably playing the game for the first time. And it's not an isolated case, as I see similar stories on the Warcraft subreddit all the time. You could say that this has nothing to do with the actual game and it's more like a community issue. While this is true to some extent, I believe that the way in which the game is designed can influence how players act. Let's look at dungeon design, for example. Nowadays, most dungeons are designed with Mythic Plus in mind. You get an X number of mob packs between boss fights and it's more or less the same formula across the board. Players are pushed to learn the meta because that's the efficient way of doing it. It's all public knowledge and there are loads of resources that explain the technicalities and help you min-max your run. And when I say loads of resources, I mean it. If you are just starting out, you will need to look into a build for your class, itemization, rotation, then get a bunch of add-ons, and after figuring out what add-ons you need, you also need to look up a guide that helps you configure those. And this is literally time that you will spend not playing the actual game. You'll either be on YouTube or on some forum or in some in-game menu, and it will take hours to get it all right. Literally hours of learning stuff about the game, troubleshooting add-ons and getting rotations right. It's literally like a second job at this point. As an average player that has a full-time job and some other commitments outside of that, it's really discouraging. Look, after a long day at work, I just want to log in and play the damn game. I don't need to sit there and take my degree in how to play my class. The game is designed in a way in which you really need to stick to the meta in order to be efficient, and this creates loads of expectations. If you want to push some keys or clear some raids, people really expect you to play by the meta, and there's little tolerance if you don't align to it. The meta always tends to change with the new patches incoming, and the whole system seems very repetitive. At this point, it seems like we are playing World of Patchcraft. And on top of that, the gearing system is quite weird to say the least, because your items will be crap when the next patch drops, and you'll need to kind of start all over again. With all that in mind, does it mean that retail is a bad game? The answer is actually no. The game is not bad, it's just hard and it's appealing to a smaller group of players. It might sound crazy for some, but at this point, Classic is more casual than retail. Like, I know that Blizzard has been trying to make the game more casual friendly and has included loads of activities that might appeal to the broader audience, but the main objective of the game, which is to clear raids and push keys, is not for the average player. As far as modern MMOs go, Dragonflight is a decent game. We can clearly see that the boss mechanics have improved over the years, and some fights are interesting and actually fun to clear. Blizzard did listen to the community to some extent and have implemented features and quality of life improvements that were very beneficial for the game. And with all that, it seems like most people are interested in the classic version of the game. I mean, even the OGs, those that have been playing WoW for ages and were saying that the game is becoming too easy. Why are those guys not playing retail, since at this point it's harder than ever to do proper progression? We need to see the bigger picture in order to find out the answer for this question. Beyond the classic versus retail dilemma, it's more a discussion about old school MMOs versus modern MMOs. You see, those of us that played back in the day, in the golden age of MMOs, when the genre was still new, we were used to a different formula, in which the journey was the most significant part of the game. And it was that way because the journey, in most cases, was completed in some of the most inefficient ways possible due to the lack of resources. Nowadays, you have videos, forums, blogs that explain every little aspect of the game and walk you through each step in order to complete certain objectives in the most efficient ways possible. It seems like the classic version of the game was less impacted by the availability of resources. Like, people fondly remember their first noob run in which it took them ages to level up, but they are not keen on doing it again inefficiently. Even if we know the quests, leveling builds and zones, the journey itself is the same. It didn't diminish. We are just more knowledgeable. In essence, Vanilla WoW is a slow-paced game. Even if you are following the most efficient leveling guide, the leveling experience is still a major part of the game. And it's not a hard game because it doesn't test your dexterity or reaction time. Instead, it tests your patience and the ability to prepare for upcoming obstacles. In retail, on the other hand, the journey has become this annoying thing in which you need to pour in a bunch of hours before you can play the actual game. You are flooded with items while leveling. The gold is not an issue when it comes to spells and mounts. It seems like the challenge was completely removed from the leveling experience. At this point, it's probably better for the game if they remove it entirely, because Blizzard made it less and less relevant over the years with each change. They probably won't do that because at the end of the day, level boosts are just another thing that they can sell on the store. It also tends to be complicated for new players, because it's not that streamlined like it used to be. You can level up in any expansion and there are these different campaigns and timelines, like who cares about all that stuff at this point? On the other hand, in Classic we start with nothing and slowly build our characters by overcoming challenges. This is such a strong concept and Classic still manages to bring it to life in a rewarding manner for the player. You literally start to work your way up by killing boars and doing meaningless errands. You end up using grey items in the beginning because that's the best thing that's available for you at that point. This humbles you and makes you realize that you're just a small drop in the ocean.
Barons to hunt Kodo, but well, in all honesty, you're more useful to us alive than dead. I believe you would find a good match with the mottled boars you'll find to the north of here.
And if you want to get that shiny piece of gear and that mount, you'll need to be prepared to put in a lot of work. When you start a new character in vanilla, you are thrown out into the world, and from that very moment you are playing the actual game. There is not much downtime, no time wasting in in-game menus. You are part of this world that feels alive, and you are not a champion that's going to save us all. Nope. You are just this random adventurer that has nothing but the ability to determine his own fate, and it feels so good compared to the preset scenario that is laid out for you by the modern game.
Champion, the veil between our world and the Shadowlands has been sundered.
The modern version of the game is very bloated, and all of this overwhelms players, making them not care about it anymore. You know, there is beauty in simplicity, and it seems like Blizzard forgot that. Like, I've been playing this game for ages. My investment in the story started with the Warcraft RTS games. Back then, the stories were simple and satisfying to follow. Like, there is some guy that did something wrong to these other guys, and now they seek vengeance. They find him, they clash into some epic fight, and someone is brutally killed. Simple and satisfying. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Classic is a perfect game and that we should fully go back to the way they did it 20 years ago. There are loads of annoying and time-consuming mechanics that people hate to this day. While some of the clunkiness is part of the game, some quality of life improvements are well welcomed. What brings people to this version of the game is the fact that it captures the old school MMO formula that made the genre so popular back in the day. When they re-released Classic in 2019, people didn't experience the same magic like back in 2004, not even new players that never touched Classic. Everyone had access to resources and guides because players have been optimizing the game for about 20 years now. But what reignited the spark for many was the fact that cooperation was mandatory throughout some of the sections of the game, and all those tools present in the modern games that create convenience at the expense of player interaction were not present anymore. Many players, including myself, like to play alone most of the times, but at the same time I hate being alone. We are all alone together, and that experience is valuable because it makes the world alive. Even if you enjoy experiencing the game alone, you still need to interact with people to form dungeon groups and to complete elite quests. In Classic you have no choice. You really need to interact with other players and work together in order to overcome common challenges. And these things take a lot of time. You can spend hours clearing a dungeon, and that's when you start to interact more and more with others and create connections. You might add someone from that group to your friend list, and you might group up in the future, and that's how friendships are born. To wrap it up, I don't believe that one version of the game is better than the other. It's just the fact that people enjoy the old MMO formula rather than the modern one. And if we want a memorable experience close to what we had back in the day, we will probably need something like Classic Plus, or a version of the game that implements the classic mechanics and brings fresh content to the the table. Content that wasn't optimized and min-maxed for years. But these are just my thoughts. Share your take on this matter in the comment section below. I'd like to hear your opinions as well. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm just getting started and it will help the channel a lot. See you on the next one.